Hello everyone, Steve Porter, candidate for Herndon Town Council. I want to start doing these weekly updates on what happened at the meeting before. So Tuesday night, we have a town council work session or a public hearing most months. This week was a work session. So I want to go over that with you, then talk a little bit about my campaign's updates and potentially answer some questions if you have them. So with no further ado, let me go ahead and pull up the agenda for last night. So it was a work session, as we mentioned before. At work sessions, the public cannot comment. It's simply town staff and the town council basically preparing for the public hearing, which is the following week. So next Tuesday, there will be a public hearing where the town people can offer comments. Important thing to keep in mind about this work session is it's the first work session since the COVID emergency started that the council can undertake routine business. For the last 5 or so months, the council has been limited to COVID-related items or those things that were urgent to maintain continuity of government. So you can expect some longer agendas and longer meetings probably through most of the rest of this year as they play catch up with a backlog of more routine things that they need to get to. Comments from a town manager. Mr. Ashton always opens this with some general comments, usually about the COVID-19 situation. The overall news is pretty good right now. Overall, Fairfax County has a fairly low rate of cases and low rate of community transmissions. Still some concerns about testing frequency, how long it takes to test, whether people are properly getting tested, and then also quarantining issues if you need to. One thing he did point out is if you have to self-quarantine and your living situation is not such that you can do so appropriately, talk to Fairfax County Public Health. They have some potential options available. Other than that, basically it's to stay the course with wear the mask, social distance, all the stuff that we've been being told to do now for months. And that pretty much was all he had to say last night. We then moved into the public hearings and ordinances. The 3 public hearings are all basically the same type of thing. They're basically conveyance of an easement to a utility company. The first 2 would be to Dominion, well, Virginia Power, Electric and Power Company, AKA Dominion. And the last one is to Verizon. So basically this is property that the town has actually acquired either through negotiated purchase or eminent domain over the last year or so. And now they need to actually transfer it over to the utility company. And so they're basically rubber stamp items for the most part. One interesting thing I did learn though is that these easements by state law can only last for 40 years. So if you actually read the actual ordinance, it conveys the property to the utility company for 40 years, at which point it would have to be reconsidered. I'll be 90 something then, so probably even if I'm elected to the council, won't be serving on the council at that point. Once we deal with those 3, we went into some general items. These are items that don't necessarily require public comment. The first one is basically appoint members to a police supplemental plan administrative committee. Again, this is sort of a rubber stamp type of thing. The police department has a 401A plan, retirement plan, and as part of that plan, there's a requirement that there be a board of employees that advises the administrator on things. This is simply to fill some vacancies on that. So nothing for the general public, at least, not anything that probably anybody cares that much about. Item number 7, next week, the town manager will make his annual State of the Town report for fiscal year 2020. He did say that he is going to have Jenny Tripoli give us a bunch of how we actually came out of 2020 financially. And then the council will need to actually have a resolution to accept that report. So really nothing on it for this evening. They saved all of that to actually forward a report next week. The next item is basically a temporary extension of a lease. Under the continuity of government rules, the town manager can actually sign emergency extensions of lease, but then they have to be ratified by the council at the next possible opportunity. So he just did one to extend a lease to the school board for some office space that they have been leasing from the town for many years. And this will extend it till the end of the calendar year to allow time for negotiations. So not really anything, yeah. It's property management. It's important in that regard, but it's not something that generally is going to be controversial or something. The other one we had to do was actually us leasing land. So same deal, the town manager signed a temporary emergency type of extension. The council now has to ratify it, but this is the town for a long time as part of their shared public parking program downtown has leased that little lot next to the Green Lizard Cycling across from a breeze. That's actually private property that they lease. This extends that lease again till the end of the year to allow for negotiations on a longer term lease. Only sort of interesting thing on that one is that the price went up, at least for the period of the temporary extension. We had been renting or leasing, that's licensing, whatever it is, that parking area for $1,000 a month. It's gone up to $1,250 a month. But it's an important part of the public-private shared parking arrangements downtown, and local and businesses downtown pay into that fund as well. So again, this will probably pretty much be a no-brainer. Resolution 10 has two different elements to it. It actually is an initiation of a zoning ordinance amendment. So what that means is this isn't actually making anything law or changing something. It's actually a resolution to start that process. So if this passes, which it should, in fact, it might have even got moved to the consent agenda, what will happen is this will go to zoning and to planning, who will actually work out the language, hold appropriate public hearings, and eventually propose an ordinance back to the council at some future date. The two things this does primarily is it changes the reference to heritage to historic throughout all of the zoning ordinances. That brings us more in line with state code and other things that refer to these type of places and homes as historic. Heritage was sort of our term, but makes it a little harder to interact with stuff. The other part of this is that it gives the staff the ability to review and issue certificates of appropriateness to certain types of projects in the what will be renamed Historic Preservation Review Board area. So right now, pretty much everything has to go to the board. This would allow smaller projects and projects of sort of a set nature to go to staff, and staff directly issue or deny the certificates of appropriateness. Really, only question I had on this was what are the appeal mechanisms, especially if it's staff doing it rather than the board doing it. But I'm sure I can get some clarity on that before this actually comes up as an actual action item. Again, this is just to start the process of considering it. The next one down was also pretty interesting in that it's another initiation resolution. So it doesn't actually do anything yet. It just starts the ball rolling within the Planning Commission and other places to hold public hearings. But what they're trying to do is take the Residence Inn property on Eldon Street and convert it to workforce housing. So more affordable housing type situation. Apparently Residence Inn has done this with a number of their older model properties. This particular Residence Inn is basically their design one style. So it's quite old, and Marriott wants to phase it out. And so that's the plan, is to actually convert it to workforce housing, which I think is really cool. It's a good use of a property. It does provide needed quote unquote middle housing types. So hopefully it will go through fairly cleanly. The biggest issue though is that right now it's actually zoned commercial. So we have to go through this process to get it zoned to some form of residential zoning map. And then they can move on with site plans or building plans and all that type of stuff. So again, this will go to the proper committee or boards. They'll have public hearings, draw something up, and at some future time, this will come back as an actual action item for the council. The consent agenda on this one, they had one change to their 2020 calendar that was on the consent agenda. Basically, the meeting that was happening on or about October 13th had been moved to accommodate the Virginia Municipal League, the VML, which most of the council members partake in or take part in. This year it's virtual though, so they don't necessarily need to have the night off. So it basically will return that moved meeting back to the normal council schedule. And I think several of the other items actually ended up getting moved down to the consent agenda. Then the last part of this was the discussion. Councilmember Delagula brought up starting the process to prohibit firearms in public facilities. As of July 1st, this is an authority that the General Assembly has granted to localities under certain restrictions. And they're looking to actually pass an ordinance that would do so. Many of the other localities around us, including Fairfax County itself last night, have enacted such legislation to ban firearms in various public facilities. My take on this is I really want to see some data on, Herndon doesn't have a lot of firearms or shootings, firearm incidents or shootings or things like that. So I'd like to see some data on, what incidents we actually have had, where they have occurred, because this ordinance can only address certain very specific types of places, and whether it would matter. And to their credit, in my opinion, the council is taking a measured approach as well. They want more feedback on this issue from the community, actual Herndon residents and Herndon businesses, on what this ordinance should look like if they do it at all. And so look for more opportunities to make comments on this. This is probably going to be a multi-month process, possibly longer. Concerns were also raised about, who's going to fight the litigation that's going to come if they pass this. Is it better to wait for some of the other jurisdictions that have already done it to be the test cases to see where exactly the courts are going to fall on this? They even floated the possibility of doing a referendum on this. So at this point, the only solid action out of this is that they've directed the town attorney to gather some information about what the other localities in the area have actually enacted and how they went about their public comment process. And once we get that information back, or the council gets that information back, they'll make some determinations on how best to proceed with, drafting an ordinance, getting public comment, eventually potentially approving something. So this isn't going to be this is going to happen in October type of thing. The town council is going to take some time with it. They realize it is a hot topic issue and that there is going to be some division in the community about what is the best approach to this. So rather than rushing anything, they want to try to do this correctly, which I applaud. I'm generally not fond of these type of legislative actions, but at least the council is trying to do it in a responsible way and listen to its citizens. They wrap up with a roundtable. Nothing really stood out to me on the roundtable except that Councilmember DeLaguila raised some concerns about how the town was approaching marijuana possession in light of the fact that as of July 1st, simple marijuana possession is a civil fine offense. It's like a traffic ticket. It's not a misdemeanor or a felony offense anymore. And there appears to be some differences in opinion or how the county is currently approaching these as opposed to how the town is approaching these. The upshot is the town attorney is going to talk to some of her peers at the county level so that they can truly understand what the county is and is not doing so that the town can make a decision on how it wants to proceed. Councilmember DeLaguila had heard that Fairfax County was basically not prosecuting in any way, shape, or form any of these, including the civil fine approach. That may be true, but that's the clarification that they want to get. Personally, I'm with Councilmember DeLaguila on this one. Simple possession is not something I really think we should be spending much time bugging people about. And as sadly as he also pointed out, it tends to be not evenly enforced across demographic groups. Not saying that's happening in Herndon, but on a statewide or national-wide perspective, marijuana possession type charges disproportionately fall, especially to the Black community, but also to the Hispanic community. So I do understand where his perspective was coming from, and I appreciate him raising that issue. That pretty much rounded out the the other thing that came up in roundtable is, for those of you who haven't heard, the town will be doing some bulk item collections in October. That's a popular program where they'll come around and pick up bigger stuff than what you can normally throw in the trash. And because of COVID, the spring one basically got nuked. They tried to make up some of it with some stuff in August and into September with some free pickups, scheduled pickups, and now they're trying to look at doing the normal, we'll go around the neighborhoods just looking for what people put out, pick it up thing sometime in October. So that really sums up how the meeting itself went. I'll go ahead and stop sharing that. As far as the campaign goes, Saturday we had a very good question and answer session at Eldon Street Tea Shop. I want to thank those who came and attended. Signe Friedrichs, one of the other town council candidates, and myself were there, as well as Sheila Olam, who's currently the vice mayor and running for mayor. Other candidates had conflicts, so they couldn't attend. So hopefully we'll have another event, either virtual or safely in person, that will involve more candidates. I also attended the Herndon local Chamber of Commerce meeting yesterday, and that's something they're trying to figure out as well. Historically, the Chamber has done an event for candidates. Obviously, COVID has made that more difficult, but they are hoping to be able to do something, so stay tuned on that. I will be doing another question and answer session like that and inviting other candidates to it. I'm looking at probably the first week of October-ish timeframe. I do think it's really important that we have opportunities for people to meet the candidates, even if it's virtually, to ask questions. And if we can get several of us together at one time, I think that allows some interplay between us, as well as giving people a chance to, meet multiple candidates at one shot, rather than, end up attending 10 different Zoom events to meet each candidate individually. Other things on the campaign trail, Herndon Community Television recorded nice intro things for each of the candidates. Those are now available on their website, will be actually airing on Herndon Community Television, and we're also given to the candidates to post wherever they want. So you can find mine on my website or on my Facebook post. I've also linked in in the elections group on Facebook. I linked in where you can go to see all of them. Then there's this event tonight. So not a lot of people joined in yet. It's new. Hopefully, as I figure out the technology and it becomes a thing, we'll see more people and opportunities for questions. Tomorrow, I will be at the Herndon Farmers Market to put out my sign, and I'll hang out probably from about 8 to 9. I have some business meetings in the morning that I have to attend, unfortunately, so I can't stay much later than that. I'll be back around noon to pick up my signs. So if you see me there, please feel free to stop by, say hi, let me know what's on your mind. This weekend will largely be more door-to-door, being done safely, but it is important, I think, for candidates, especially non-slate candidates like myself, to get in front of people. So I will be continuing to do that. We're also gearing up to do a postcard campaign. So opportunities that are out there to help with the campaign include, if you'd like to help with a postcard campaign, which is basically writing handwritten messages on postcards and hand addressing them to people, let me know. And it's something you can do safely in your own home, but it does, I got to do about 2,000 of these postcards, so I could use a little help. If you're interested in putting out a yard sign or doing some lit drops where you just don't necessarily have to interact with anybody, you basically just take my literature to a preset walking path and you drop it at every door. There's opportunities for that. And obviously, if you have the ability and would like to support the campaign financially, I would appreciate it. Doing right now, because of COVID and stuff, mailers have become much more important, but that gets expensive. Even when using the least expensive and least effective modes of postal delivery, which is basically what most people would classify as junk mail, the stuff that's just sort of shoved in everybody's mailbox, to actually reach all of Herndon is still approaching $2,000. So it's not cheap. So if you would like to help the campaign financially, it would be appreciated. So with that being said, you can reach me at www.porterforherndon.com. Again, that's PORTER, the number 4, herndon.com. I'm also Porter for Herndon on Facebook and Twitter. And this message was paid for by Stevan Porter. Oh, that's what I forgot. Campaign finance reports for July and August have been filed. You can view them online. They are sort of interesting in what is and in some cases is not being reported. So, I'll let you draw your own conclusions about the different financial reports, but they're worth taking a look at just to get an idea of where candidates' money is coming from and how they're spending their money. And with that, I will note that my campaign committee, which is paying for this, is Stevan Porter for Herndon Council, and we'll call it a night. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.